At that time, I was going through a bit of a difficult period in my own life with depression, and happened to stumble across an ultra race online that was being held later in the year, and I just sort of signed up. It was the transcontinental race from Belgium to Turkey at the time, and I went and did it, and I fell in love with it. Came back to work and I told my boss, I'm quitting. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to become a professional cyclist." And he kind of laughed, and then I was like back at square one, and I had to work out how I was going to make it happen. We were just cowboys, and we were just like playing with an opportunity. But yeah, fast forward now 8 or 9 years, and that dream's become a reality, and it's become a job, and I guess I'm now a qualified ultracyclist. I'd like to say, like, I'm an open book, I'm happy to talk about anything. I don't sort of have any secrets, and I'm quite happy to talk about my past, and in the hope that I can sort of help somebody else.
Hey, my name is William, and today, alongside Robin, we had the chance to speak with Jack Thompson. Jack is an Australian ultracyclist we first came across on YouTube. He's ridden further, suffered longer, and pushed himself way harder than most can even imagine. They call him the most extreme cyclist on earth. But for us, the real story wasn't just the records, it was why he does it. So in this episode, we are going to dive into his journey, the struggles that led him to cycling, the battles he fought along the way, and ultimately, how sports reshaped his life. So without any further ado, please welcome Jack Thompson. I think it would be great just to start things, is like, it was a bit hard for me to kind of grasp and get, like, usually it's quite nice to put label on people so you have an idea of who they are. So the question that I'm getting to is, like, if you were to meet someone for the first time, how do you talk about what you're doing, and how do you introduce yourself to someone that you meet for the first time?
If it's like a work sense and they ask me, like, what do you do for work? I'd tell them I was a professional cyclist. But then the strange thing is, like, I don't race. But like, I make my living from riding a bike. So it's a funny one, and I was writing something this week about it. I've never kind of felt like I fitted in, because I don't, you know, you could say, "Oh, you're a professional cyclist, but you don't race," or, "You're an ultra cyclist, but you don't do the ultra cycling races either." And I'm kind of feel like I'm lost in the middle somewhere, and I've struggled with that over time, like, because I don't really know where I belong. But I've sort of started to realize that you don't have to belong anywhere, and that's kind of cool. So yeah, I guess, like, I'm an ultra cyclist, and I'd like to think of myself as like a bit of a storyteller as well. It's more than just numbers and going and doing crazy things. It's about trying to take people on the journey with me, and share the. I'd like to say, like, I'm an open book. Like, I'm happy to talk about anything. I don't sort of have any secrets, and I'm quite happy to talk about my past, and in the hope that I can sort of help somebody else.
So ultra cyclist, but was that always the case since you were a kid, or at one point you started to call yourself an ultra cyclist? Like, how did things go?
Yeah, it's been like a crazy kind of progression. Started I started triathlon is kind of how I got into riding a bike when I was 12 or 13. And at that time, I was going through a bit of a difficult period in my own life with depression, and not really knowing where I sort of belonged at school, and it was kind of a bit of a difficult period. And I found that the triathlon at the time gave me a really good, gave me goals, like, I was training, I had something I was planning towards, and it kept me in a really good headspace. And as I went through school, I decided I wanted to go to university and get a degree, and I realized I'd probably have to give the triathlon away. So I gave it away, went to university, got a degree in construction management and economics. And it was during that time my mood was kind of not in a great place. I was partying a lot. I was exercising, but I was going to the gym. I wasn't doing any kind of endurance sport. And I actually developed a drug addiction. So went into rehab with a drug addiction. When I came out, it was my dad who said to me, "Look, why don't we get you back on a bike?" And I sort of wasn't really interested, to be honest. I've spent so many years away from it. but I gave in and I went for a ride with him and I fell in love with it. And I've got an obsessive personality disorder, so if I do something, it's like I'm all in. Um, and so immediately, I decided I wanted to race in the Tour de France. This is a guy at like 21 who hasn't ridden a bike for 5 years. So I started like training pretty hard and doing local races and realized I actually didn't like the racing. Um, I realized I kind of just enjoyed the training and then, traveling and going and exploring. Uh, and so I just happened to stumble across an ultra race online that was being held later in the year, and I just sort of signed up. It was the transcontinental race from Belgium to Turkey at the time, and I went and did it, and I fell in love with it. And from then on, I guess I started calling myself an ultra cyclist. And I came back to work and I told my boss, I'm quitting. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to become a professional cyclist." And he kind of laughed and, I sort of handed everything over. And then I was like back at square one and I had to, work out how I was going to make it happen. And I think that's probably where my obsessive personality kind of came into its own. It's just I was so focused on what I wanted to achieve. And it didn't happen overnight. It took a number of years to sort of turn it into a career. And I think I was also lucky, like ultra cycling was just sort of beginning to boom. But yeah, fast forward now 8 or 9 years, and it's that dream's become a reality, and it's become a job, and I guess I'm now a qualified ultra cyclist.
Yeah, you can put that on your CV. Yeah. And just because I found that it's very interesting for a kid to at 13 think like understand that he's in a difficult spot and try to find something to help. Uh, as a kid, like when did you find out that something was wrong in a way with you? Was it something gradual, or did something happen that made you feel okay, something's up? Because, for example, I know that as a kid myself, when I moved house, like at 8 years old, then I went through a bit of a difficult period, but it took time for me to understand that things were not quite good. So I wonder what it was like for you.
I think for me, the big thing was when I went from like primary school to then to secondary school, and you're kind of the young kid at school again. You've gone from being sort of the older kid to suddenly the young kid, and I guess I felt a little bit like didn't really know where I belonged. And as time went on, say that first year of secondary school, I just like I kind of realized and it was probably my parents, but like I wasn't happy. Like the things that used to make me happy, they weren't making me happy anymore. And I'd actually developed some like obsessive kind of like rituals, I call them, where I was sort of having to in my mind, I had to do certain things. And if I didn't do them, I'd convince myself something was going to happen. It was almost like I had another voice
Mm.
inside. And when I tried to explain that to my parents, they said, "Look, we think you need to chat with someone." And that's, I guess, when I kind of realized, oh, so like not everybody has this. I just sort of thought it was normal. And that's when I started going and chatting to a psychologist and trying to work it out. But it was, yeah, it was like quite a scary experience, I guess, because I think, like at that age, you're going through puberty. You're at, you're the young kid at school again. You don't really know like what you want to do after school. There's a lot of confusion, and then to sort of have this stuff going on upstairs is quite scary as
Yeah.
well. So yeah, it's a tough time.
Yeah, and I feel you in what you're saying, because I mean I had this for a bit of time, and what you said about this voice, uh, like making you think in a weird way. I had a bit of the same. Like I had a thing where I I was obsessed with being at home, and like for example, I would have a tissue at school, and I was like stressed out and anxious about putting it in the bin at the school because I felt like everything I own had to stay home, you know. And it was, and so I started to, that's a point where I started to think, okay, that's weird. I need to talk to my parents. And then I also went to see a psychologist, and then things worked out, but I don't have a clear like memory of how it worked out in the end.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you also like, do you have any memories of that first time seeing a psychologist? Because I remember they were telling me to write my dreams and saying how I feel, and I was pretty young, so you're kind of naive at the time. You're trying to stuff, and you're a bit skeptic. But
Mm.
do you have any memories of that?
Yeah, I remember being like really nervous because it was like I almost felt like there was something wrong with me, and that I was being forced to go and not forced, but like I was being taken to go and see this doctor who was going to try and fix me, and I didn't know what that was going to involve, and that made me quite nervous. Am I going to have to change what my routine? Am I going to like, what's he going to tell me to do? Is he going to tell me I've got some sort of strange condition? A lot of unknowns. And I'm similar to you in that I don't know what it was that kind of helped other than actually just talking about it aloud. And I think that sense of talking about it, it's almost like an acknowledgement that I do have a bit of a problem, but I've told somebody, so that problem's less of a problem now because he knows about it. And I think that was a big help.
Wanted to know, like, at that time, did you have any friends at school, or like, how was life? Because in my case, I mean, I had a pretty happy life, like in terms of my environment. There was nothing really to be scared about. And did you have an environment that was good in around you at the time?
Yeah, like my parents have always been super supportive. I didn't have a lot of friends at school, and I guess I struggled to really like connect with people. If I wasn't kind of interested, I wasn't interested. And like we can get to that in a little bit because I've recently got a diagnosis that helps to explain some of those things. And so like at school I kind of felt alone. At home it was fine because my family I was really close with, but at school I was almost, yeah, I didn't enjoy being there and I wanted to just get
Mm.
out of there as soon as I could.
The triathlon, was it did you join a club or did you just started to do it by yourself? Because many people now that just do it by themselves, but I guess you were part of a club.
Yeah, it was actually my brother who said to my parents, "Look, do you think I can ask Santa for a road bike at Christmas, like a proper bike?" And I was the older brother, and I thought, "Oh, well, if he's going to get a bike, then I want one as well," because I didn't want to be, I didn't want him to have something I didn't have. So I also asked for a bike, and I got one. And I had a good mate whose dad was a keen cyclist. So he took us out for the first couple of rides. And then it was me and a mate, we joined a club of other kind of young people. And we were like the youngest at the club. So it was quite good because we had these mentors that we could kind of look up to, and I guess they helped to guide us and steer us in the right direction. But I always felt more connected to the people at the triathlon club than I did to anybody at school because I felt we shared a common interest and there was a level of respect between us. And so that was like a bit of a savior having that club environment around me.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that like after you had goals of like going to the Tour de France. So was it because as a kid you already started to have results, like when you started doing triathlon, or you were like the average type of people, or you already had some kind of standout performances at that time?
The triathlon I was quite good at the time. Like I competed at quite a high level. Um, but honestly, like the Tour de France thing, I think it was more because that was the only direction you could go. It's like there was no other sort of opportunity if you weren't going to race the tour. Like, what were you going to do? Like, how were you? Like, what was success in cycling if it wasn't the Tour de France? And so, I think that's why I aspired to do it because I just wanted to be successful at what I was doing.
I mean,
And
that's
I
a
think,
funny way to frame goals because like the way they taught us about goals at school was that the goal that you should set to yourself should be like kind of realistic. And I think
yeah,
like participating in the Tour de France is probably the single hardest goal you could come up with in cycling,
yeah,
aside, I don't know, from winning the actual race. But I,
yeah.
I mean, how did you stay motivated then to chase such a bold objective?
Like honestly, like the Lance Armstrong books, like I remember reading them at school, and it was like for me they were super powerful. I remember like I forget it was like an English class. We had to like choose a book and then analyze it, and then you do a bit of like writing about the book. And like for me, it was always those books. And the other thing was like living in Australia, that whole, I guess, European cycling world was all kind of a bit of a fantasy because, like, with the time difference and things, it was always something that was on super late at night time. It's not like you had the internet at a level that it is now where you could just sort of go on and stream it at another time. It was like you either watched it at 2 in the morning or you didn't watch it. And so there was always this, I guess, a bit of a mystique about it. And I think for that reason, it was almost like this kind of mystery fantasy world that I wanted to be a part of. And that just sort of like kept me going. And like I did have some reasonable local results. Again, I was only like young, but I think that as well, it sort of like spurred on a bit of hope that maybe it was possible.
What's the like in Australia? Obviously, like with the time difference, you're living in another like space and time, and you have other sports that are famous. And for a kid in Australia that loves sports, who does he want to become? Like for me, I wanted to be Zidane, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, being French and loving football, it was pretty easy. And what's it like for a young Australian?
Typically, I'd say most boys would like to be an AFL player. So we've got our own sport called Australian Football League, AFL. And that's kind of like the world in Australia revolves
Yeah.
around AFL. And so there was a player at the time who since had a pretty difficult life, but his name was Ben Cousins. And he was kind of your like a good looking guy, bit of a sort of bad boy as well, but played really well. I'd say there was a lot of guys my age that kind of aspired to be like him. Um, but I mean, it's such a just thinking about that now, you realize how how distanced you are from the rest of the world because that's a sport that's only played in Australia that nobody else knows about. But it's like that is life.
Yeah. And for you, it was more Lance Armstrong, even though for him, like this Ben Cousins life ended up being quite different.
Yeah. For me, it was almost, yeah, it was always like Lance Armstrong. If I think about cycling, um, like, yeah, when I think back, like, he was kind of like everything, like, he was like a survivor. He was, he'd won all these things. Like at the time, it was before any of the big busts had happened. And it was just like, how good is this guy, Like, he wins everything and he's been through everything and he was like a hero.
And do you have now someone you look up to, like in 2025, or like has that vision changed? Probably it has, because that was what, like 20, 25 years ago? I don't know, 15 years ago.
Yeah. I think the funny thing is like I all of my kind of inspiration now is like outside of cycling. It's all
Okay.
and it's not necessarily to do with like performance. It's like it's more like a mindset or somebody in another sport, like for example, in like snowboarding or skiing, like a free skier or somebody that's forging their own path. I think that's more what I look to as inspiration now as opposed to a cyclist. Obviously, the cyclists, like if I have to think like off the top of my head, who would be my favorite cyclist now? I don't know, like as far as like entertainment goes, Pidcock's pretty entertaining. Like, yeah, I don't know him, don't know much about him, but like as far as racing goes, like he always seems to entertain. But I don't know, like I can tell you I don't want to be like him.
Have you heard about Lionel Sanders? Because in a way, your journey seems to be very much like his. Like he started from a place like kind of like a dark place, we could say, where sports was his savior. So he took the professional performance way, where you could say that you took the kind of more unique journey, I would say. But do you know the guy?
Yeah, the triathlete, he's based in
Yeah.
Texas or something.
I
I
think
know
he's
the
based
guy.
in the desert. I think
Yeah. Oh, maybe
Tucson,
Tucson, yeah.
Tucson. Yeah, I don't know how you pronounce that. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched a bunch of his YouTube videos back in the day, to be honest.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, like, and I don't know much about his backstory. I just used to find it fascinating how he'd give you like this insight into his life.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think,
His
yeah,
YouTube is really good, and
yeah,
like just before we started to move into ultra cycling, I would just like to go back to university because with Robin we were at university only a few years ago, and why did you think life kind of went sideways at that time? Because it kind of went sideways for me too, on the first year, and somehow I was able to pick it up on the second year. But what were you think? Because maybe some people that listen to us are actually at university right now, so if
yeah,
they could avoid some of the pitfalls, and I
yeah,
know that at university you have a shit ton of pitfalls, so if you
yeah.
could name a few, maybe that'd be really helpful.
I For me it was like a bit of an identity crisis. Like
Mhm.
I think, you go into university, you've just come from school, suddenly you're like an adult, you've got this big world ahead of you, you've got nobody kind of controlling what time you have to be there, and you've got this sense of freedom. And as well, you're trying to work out sort of where you belong. For me, it was I studied construction management, and that construction world is a real, I don't want to say ego, but it's like guys, um, it's dominated by like strong guys with beards and like muscles and tattoos, and like I was this young, skinny little kid, like I didn't feel like a man. Like I still felt like a boy. And I guess I was trying to work, I was trying to kind of fit into that landscape of like being a man. And I think that's why I was going to the gym. I wanted to be bigger, and I wanted to sort of look stronger. And as well, like you're 18, suddenly you can go out and drink. Um, you know, you can party, you can do whatever you want. And, if you have a obsessive style personality like I do, then like you go all in. And so I just
Mm.
went all in. And I think it's the combination of that freedom, but also trying to find myself. I was just kind of like throwing darts. Like, do I fit in here? Do I fit in there? Like, where do I kind of fit in? Like, and for me, it was just like I was off the rails because I was trying to be something that I wasn't.
I think like at what point did you know that you had that kind of personality? Because I think that if you had known that before, I feel like somehow you would have known yourself better and therefore avoided these kind of things.
Yeah. So, so last year I got diagnosed with ADHD. So this, and I'll come back to your question in a minute.
Mhm.
A lot of so like addiction problems, unable to concentrate at school. My mind was always elsewhere. A lot of my past now, I think, is attributed to the fact that I actually had undiagnosed ADHD, and I was not medicated for it. And so, like, essentially, I had, my mind was craving this constant high because I wasn't getting the high naturally. And I think if I'd known that at school or at a young age and I was actually properly treated for it, then I wouldn't have gone down the route that I went down. Yeah, that I went down. But I think at the time, like we had no idea, and like I was constantly chasing like the next buzz or the next high or the next like lot of excitement because otherwise life kind of felt boring for me.
Mm.
And when you got diagnosed, like, did you was it something you wanted to do yourself? Like, I want to make sure, or was there a specific thing that led you to make that test?
Yeah, super random actually. I was doing a project back in Australia in 2023, and one of the sponsors was a mental health startup that had a series of psychologists, psychiatrists. And I was in the car with them after the project, and we were going to visit some schools. And I got chatting with the director, and he asked me, he'd been with me for the last couple of days, and he just asked me straight up. He said, "Have you ever thought about getting tested for ADHD?" And I kind of just laughed, and I was like, "Nah, like I'm not ADHD." And he said, "Yeah, no, look, I'm just asking, like, if you did ever want to come and chat to any of our like clinicians, I'd be happy to put you in touch and you can do it." And it just kind of like in my mind, it planted a bit of a seed. And I thought, yeah, maybe I will do that because, what could hurt? Like,
Mm.
what hurts it going to do if the answer's no? And I went and did it. And like, he said, like, you've got combined ADHD. So you've got, there's two different types of ADHD. You've got both. Um, and he said, if you weren't already doing so much exercise, I'd tell you to do more exercise, but you're kind of already doing that. And I think that's how you've sort of been able to keep on track. Um, and so we ended up going down the medication route. And like honestly, it's changed my life. And I've recently filmed a video about it, which is due to go out in a couple of weeks, talking about the diagnosis and everything. But like it's been like a light bulb going on
Okay.
once I started the medication. Like life's different now, so it's been pretty pivotal.
Amazing. And did you have doubts, like, when, like, was it a relief at first to know that you had something like diagnosed and like medical and scientific? And did you have any doubts before starting to go with medication? Because like if you've lived 35 years of your life like
Yeah,
being just cool and doing just maybe a lot of sports,
yeah.
then you can feel okay. And now I'm gonna take medication. That can feel, that must feel a bit weird.
So for me, I was actually nervous that the diagnosis would come back that I wasn't ADHD because I'd started reading about it. Like it's quite a long process to get the diagnosis, a lot of testing, and like they don't want to misdiagnose you, obviously. Um, and the more I read about it, the more I was like, everything I'm reading is like explaining my life basically. And so then I was nervous, like, and what if it comes back and it says I'm
Yeah.
not? Then I'm kind of like, I feel like completely lost. Um, and then the medication side of things, for me, like, so like, I'd say, what's the best way to tackle this? Um, I've coped throughout life, like I've managed to get through it and I've achieved some cool things, but I feel like I've been playing the game of life like a game of Tetris. And like I've been trying to play Tetris on like a video game controller with one arm tied behind my back. And I've never been able to like really put stuff in place and manage it how I want to. And I've also felt like my whole life, my mind is like a highway, and there's cars and there's motorbikes and there's noise. And I've never had silence inside my mind. And so when the psychiatrist said, look, the medication, this is the effect that it will have, and it will quieten down the noise. I couldn't I couldn't imagine what that would be like not having noise.
Yeah.
And so when I took it, and it took a while to sort of work out the right dosage, but when I got to the right dose, it was suddenly like, when you're on a plane and you put the noise canceling headphones on, and suddenly it's like, whoa, like there's nothing. Like that's how my mind is now. But I'm so used to it being like chaos that like, yeah, it's been like a big thing for me.
I mean, the noise cancellation analogy is actually really good because
Yeah.
the moment you remove the headphone also on the plane, then you're like, how can I survive
Yeah,
without it?
man.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So before you found that medication which helped you a lot, did you have any other like methods that you found? I like the first time we talked to you, you mentioned that you were waking up every day at 4 a.m. Like you seem
Yeah.
to have a pretty strict or very strict rather routine in life. Is that kind of things that is it like an
Yeah.
example of things that helped you?
Yeah. For me, what and I was kind of doing it without knowing why I
Mm,
was doing it, but I've always been really um I need to be really organized, and that's given me a sense of control. Like if I don't write things down and I don't plan things and I don't stick to a schedule, life feels like I'm, diving in a dirty bin trying to, find my way in and around what I need to do. Like there's just banana peel that like that's how it feels. But by writing everything down and like having a plan and knowing what time I'm getting up, it brings a sense of like calm because I've never had that otherwise. And I think that's been like my whole life. That's been my coping mechanism is like having the plan, having it written down, having the goals, being very like strict with myself. Um, and like, yeah, I only realize that now though, having got the
Mm.
diagnosis.
And after you got after you've put on the noise canceling headphones, we'll use this analogy throughout the episode.
Yeah.
Were you scared that this routine that you had like crafted, you would no longer maybe need it or be able to do it? Or naturally you felt so good that in a way nothing had to change?
Yeah, it was more that it was like nothing has to change. And it was almost like time slowed down. And like suddenly, I forget if there's a movie on this, but I try and explain it. It's almost like I could see I can now, in my mind, it feels like I can see what's going to happen before it happens. Everything's sort of like, hmm, yeah, I shouldn't do that because that will end up like that. Whereas before it was like, yeah, I'm going to try and do it. And it was like I was impulsive. But now it's kind of like, and getting back to your question, it's like those routines are still super important, but it's also because I've got them plus the medication, it's like suddenly I've got all this extra time in the day that I was faffing about doing stuff before, and it's opened up opportunity. So I was not scared that they were going to disappear. I was more like
Mm.
excited about, wow, I've actually got like time to do the editing of videos that like I just thought would never happen before.
So there is a certain like type of rhythm that you had and kind of control on your life. But at the same time, the moment that you left your job in Australia, you totally immersed yourself into a journey in which you didn't have like or rather it was full of like uncertainty because you
Yeah.
didn't know how it was going to work out. So there is this kind of
Yeah.
difference love because it's I think it's like starting such a difficult journey is probably the opposite of like
Yeah.
living a very controlled and life that you can anticipate. So how did that feel for you?
Um, you know what? Like when I think back, I think I'd been so kind of like unhappy at work for so long
Mhm.
that like even though I knew it was going to be difficult, I was kind of like it can't really be much more difficult than like what I'm currently doing because like I'm going to work. I hate what I'm doing. I get all the stuff I need to get done like first thing in the morning, and then I'm just on the internet looking at cycling stuff because like I was efficient, I could just get what I needed to get done. I could hyper focus on it and get it done. And
Yeah.
then like I was so fucking bored. I was just at work, like, give me 50 more things to do. Like I'm just bored. And like I felt like it's a wasted life. And so the idea of actually, well, hang on, maybe yeah, it is going to be a little bit uncertain, but maybe I can actually do something with my life. I think that almost like was inspiration in itself that, maybe, yeah, take a bit of an uncomfortable decision and then maybe you're in control of what the rest of your life looks like. And I think the important thing for me as well was I actually, and I'm super fortunate, I had parents that were like, oh, if you're not happy, then you should go and like try and work out what makes you happy. And I think that's super important because I think a lot of guys and girls go to university and get a degree, and then they feel like they have to follow that pathway. And I think their parents probably, a lot of parents expect them to follow that pathway. And I think I was super fortunate in the lottery of who my parents are that I had parents that were like, if you're not happy with it, like, why don't we try and find what makes you happy? And they didn't make me feel like judged for wanting to go and do something else. They didn't like they wanted to make sure it was the right decision, but I think they'd seen for a long time that I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. And so when I got the courage up to actually leave, they were like fully supportive of me leaving.
How long it took you to actually leave the company? Like,
I
how much
reckon like
suffering did you endure before saying, okay, this is too much. I gotta do something about it?
I reckon it was honestly like probably 2 or 3 years in the like
Okay,
I
I,
was
I I thought we were talking in months. So, okay, that was actually like a long
yeah.
time.
Like I got along super well with everyone at work. It
Mhm.
was just the field I wasn't interested. And like it's like if somebody said to you like, oh, you've got to go and I don't know, what's something you're not interested. You've got to go and like count playing cards for the rest of your life. Like why? What is the point in living if I've got to go and do this? And that's where I was at. I was just like, I fucking hate it.
It makes me laugh like nervously because I see so much of what I thought in the last, because I left my job after like 2.5 years, and the last year was really like a big struggle. But at the same time, I really liked the people that I worked with. I was pretty good at my job. Like people were happy with what I was doing, but I felt so. I started feeling a bit depressed, and I remember, and that's also a link with what you said about being so bored that in the end, the risk that you take and the new road that's, yeah, a bit scary and uncertain, it seemed, so at that moment where you're so bored, it seems like the rational thing to do. So it's not a risk anymore. Like
Yeah.
I get people like they associate risk with doing something a bit irrational. But sometimes like taking the risk is the rational thing to do, and
Yeah.
that's what happened to me as well. But yeah, it's I really connected with what you said. And how old were you when you left the job completely?
I would have been I would have been 22 or 23 maybe.
Okay, so
So it
you
was
were.
yeah, it was kind of funny because in Australia at the time, the construction industry was booming. And so like while I was studying, what they did is they basically said, all right, we're going to constrict everything so that all of your studies on one day because there was like a demand for people working in construction. So even from like first year uni, I was essentially working full time. So I spent kind of 4 years at uni working full time and then went into like proper full time where I qualified. So it was like 7 years or something that I've been at one company, even though I was super young,
Yeah.
because I've spent that time at uni there as well. And like you say, it's like the risk of there's more risk of not quitting is like what's going to happen to me if I
Mm.
stay here than like the opportunity if I leave.
Where do you think you would be now if you would have stayed?
I don't know, like probably with an addiction problem in Australia, like I don't know, just
Yeah.
I shudder to think, like
Yeah.
makes me a bit scared.
And when you so also something that's quite important when you're taking like when you're changing path is you'd been working for 7 years, so you had a bit of money, like you had a bit of a mattress. Is it
Yeah.
do we say that? Have a
Yeah,
mattress?
like a bit of a
Yeah.
safety blanket
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah. I had a little bit. I because I was still living at home. I spent most of the time, well, I moved out at the end, but I'd spent a good chunk of time living at home, so I didn't have rent expenses. So I was lucky in that sense that I had a bit of
Mm,
money to play with when I left, that I
mm,
could sort of like experiment a bit. But I also like that was an interesting transition because I was like I knew I needed money, and to begin with I signed up on a like I was going on to the local, I don't know what you guys have in Madrid or France, like a Wallapop, for example, is like a platform where people advertise services, or people say, "Hey, I need my garden sprinklers fixed," and then somebody can respond. So I was like
okay.
going onto those forums and asking if I could fix people's concrete pavers in the garden because I needed the money. And like I was like, I never wanted to like bludge, like I always wanted to um I wanted to be successful, not necessarily like rich. I wasn't focused on being rich, but I knew I needed money to do what I wanted to do. And so I always, and I think the background in construction, it taught me a lot about contracts, crafting emails, expressing yourself on like on an email. So and that sort of led me down that path of, hang on, I know how a contract works, so I can actually reach out for sponsorship, or I can pitch an idea to a tourism board to go and ride in a different country. And while I hated the work, I had a lot of skills that I developed over that time that really like accelerated my growth in the sort of the new direction, which was the ultra cycling. Um, and so like all was not kind of lost, like there was a lot that I learnt there and that I now still apply to life now. It was more just the field I was in was wrong.
Yeah.
And so after how many months or years you started to make a living with the ultra cycling?
Or probably like
Because I guess it's
um
not easy. Like it's not the
nah,
easiest
nah.
like type of job I think to make a living, right?
Like ultra cycling at the time kind of didn't exist, like there was people doing bike packing and bike touring, and it didn't like bike
Mm.
well, ultra cycling as it exists now didn't exist then, so it was trying to navigate that was difficult. But I kind of like I saw opportunities where maybe like other people didn't see them, like, and I don't know if that's because I came at it from a different direction, but like as an example, I loved the idea of going and riding my bike in Asia. And I thought, how can I go and ride in Asia? And I started connecting some dots. I thought, all right, well, there's probably a tourism board in Asia that's trying to promote Asia as a sports destination. So I'm going to reach out to them. And then if they accept my proposal to go and ride there, I'm then going to pitch it to a cycling magazine, because I'm going to have this story and I'm going to have images of me riding somewhere different. And
Mm.
I started like connecting these opportunities. And then, oh, if I'm in a magazine, then I can seek some sponsorship dollars because I'm then getting exposure for brands.
Mm.
And like my more, I guess, like don't want to say business, but like the cogs were ticking upstairs, and I was like trying to work out, how can I make this all happen? And that's exactly what I did. I'd pitch ideas to tourism boards, I'd sell the idea to a magazine, and then I'd seek sponsorship because I was getting brand exposure in magazines. And it wasn't like a massive income, but like my trip to Asia was paid for, and I had some pocket money coming in from the brands. I didn't have any expenses bike wise because most of the time the brands were giving me the equipment, they weren't giving me cash.
Mm.
And so I didn't have massive expenses otherwise because I was obsessed with it. Like I wasn't doing anything else.
Mm.
I had to pay for like food if I wanted to go and eat out. I had to like, normal living expenses. But like I wasn't drinking, I wasn't buying clothes, I wasn't doing anything like that. And
And I'm
so,
sure you were stoked to get like a specialized bike or
oh,
whatever was your first bike sponsor. Like
yeah, I was
that must feel like amazing, right? Too.
like a pair of sunglasses. My first sponsorship was a sunglass company. I was
Yeah,
so stoked.
you're right.
I got 3 pairs of sunglasses. I was over the moon.
Yeah. And that's the difference when you really pursue something that you love and like something that you don't really care about. Like you get happy for sunglasses, whereas like
Yeah.
you would have been maybe dissatisfied with $1,000 paycheck bonus because you just didn't
Yeah.
care about the job.
And the thing is, it's like if I was working, all the money I was making, I was spending on bike equipment. So like, hang on, now I'm actually getting given the bike equipment and I've got all this time that I wasn't at work. So like, I'm still sort of in the same position. Like I'm not without anything.
Mm. And how have things changed regarding sponsors? Like, is it easier now? Do people contact you, or is still you like reaching out and getting like kind of crazy ideas and making them
It's
work?
over the years, it changes a little bit depending on where the industry's at.
Hmm.
I know in like probably the like easiest time, or like if I look back, the kind of period in time where it was easiest to get sponsors was like 20, just pre-COVID.
Hmm.
I feel like then ultra cycling was taking off. I was kind of in the right place with what I was doing, and like brands had money to spend on things. And I think over time the social media landscape's changed. I think print magazines don't really exist anymore, so it's a it's a different landscape. I think the problem with digital media is like today's mainstream, yesterday's extreme is today's mainstream. So it's like,
Yeah.
you're only as relevant as what happens today. Like what happened yesterday is kind of old news now. Whereas in a magazine, it was like that was published and that was like 3 months. That was like the news. And so it's different now. And I think you've, I like if I was giving advice to myself now, if I was coming into it now in this current day and age, the one thing I'd say to myself, or the biggest piece of advice is, what are you actually offering a brand? Are you offering them value? And if the answer is, oh, I'm not sure, then like there's a problem, like the biggest thing for me with like approaching a sponsor or a sponsor coming to me is like, can I offer you value? And if I can, then great. But if I can't, then I'm not going to sign a deal because like I understand how it works. They're going to give me something and I want to give something in return. And I think that's a common mistake that a lot of people, or a trap a lot of people fall into. It's like they want the free stuff, but they're not really sure like how they're going to give back. And so they'll do a 1 year deal and they kind of burn that bridge. And it's like you really have to, it's like it's business. Like yeah, it's give and take, it's a contractual agreement. And I think you have to kind of be aware of how that works. And it's something I've always kind of pride myself on. And I think again, it comes back to that construction background is like I kind of knew how that worked and it played a big role in now how I approach sponsors and negotiate with them.
I guess now it's like you said, it changed like pretty drastically. Like now the idea of doing an Ironman is not so much of a crazy thing. Like
Yeah.
William, he did one, and I mean, when you did it, like it was 3 years ago, right? Or 2 years ago?
Yeah,
I
three
don't know,
years ago. Yeah.
3 years ago. Still at the time, like it was still bigger than it is now, you know? So like in 3 years now so much people are, I mean, I don't say this as a bad thing. Like it's good that people have high objectives, but it seemed like in terms of the digital media, now you know a bit that if you do extreme stuff, you can make a living out of it. So in the end, the ends, I don't know if I'm gonna say in the right way. Maybe you'll correct me. The ends
Yeah.
come before the means. Is
Yeah.
it in? And so it's weird. Like it's pretty strange because what's on? If we come back to your story, like you started this because that's what drove you, like that's really what you wanted to do. And now it's maybe harder to know really if you really if you do something because you really want to do it, or because you see that what you could get if you do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that's clear, but I guess it got a bit too much in the last few years. And we had a triathlete a couple episodes ago, and he was saying it's so hard for us to fight with the running influencers, like the fitness influencers,
Yeah.
because like all the brands, they are going to go where the people are.
Yeah.
And when you're a triathlete, you're actually like, it's your job, like to be good at sport and to run and to cycle.
Yeah.
But there's no money for you left because
Yeah.
there are guys with 100K followers doing like amateur Ironmans. And now it's, yeah, it's a bit of a weird space.
Super weird space because, and so my wife's a psychologist, and she was telling me the other day that like when she chats with like children now, if she asks them, like what are their sort of goals and aspirations, so many of them now say like an influencer. Like that's a job that they see that as a job.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because you think like when you guys were at school and when I was at school, and like obviously like there's a bit of difference, but like I imagine like you guys were still in that era where it's like, oh, I want to be a doctor or I want to be an engineer.
But
It's like
actually,
this.
no. I think we were the first ones to say, or because I like the idea of being a YouTuber when I was like 10.
Okay.
No, but I mean, but it was really the start. Like when we were 10,
Yeah.
it was 2010. Like it was the
No, but
start.
actually, it
I
was
still
not. I
wanted
want
to
to be a
be,
YouTuber. I want to make YouTube videos, and that's the huge difference, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like an editor.
Like I just wanted to make videos for the sake of it, and I was taking my camera and I was filming my Call of Duty gameplays. That's what I was doing
Because
when I was 10.
at the time, we didn't know that it made money,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I think changed the whole, like once it started to be something that could get you a good life,
Yeah.
then everything starts to crumble in a way.
That it's like I could talk about this for like days on end
Mm.
because like I'm so like fascinated by it. And it's like what you said about the running, for example, is like there's I mean with social media there is like a formula, and I think it's not about like I saw something recently like they said stop thinking about the algorithm, all right? Every time you talk about algorithm, replace it with like audience. And it's like you need to be producing content that people want to see. So it's like you're not trying to impress the algorithm, you're just trying to impress the audience. And it's like if you just concentrated on just impressing the audience all the time, like most people could grow a following, but then I feel like that's kind of fake. It's like I'm not doing this to impress an audience. Like I'm doing it because I want to do it, and if an audience follows, then that's great. And so I
Yeah.
think like the objective of social media is like broken. It's like
Yeah.
trying to get clicks. It's crazy.
And even at our level, like this really rings a bell to a discussion we just had like a few days ago with William, because on our page, like I'd say we still make content that follows the trend. Like we're not doing something completely different, even though we try to put like really our instincts into it. And whenever we got a video that performed really well, we never like like replicated the concept to try to uh take the most out of it. And we always wanted to create something different. We're a bit naive about like people will follow still
Yeah.
when and the other day, like we made two videos. Actually, we spent so many hours making the videos. It was one on the footballer and one on Johnny Wilkinson, like a famous
Yeah,
rugby
the
player.
rugby player.
And the results were terrible. And we spent so much time thinking about the videos, and 10 hours, and then you get 5K views, which it's like really low compared to what we could do and compared to the time we had put
Yeah.
in. And so we had this discussion, like, what do we do? Like, what what the thing we really want to do is a podcast, but we spend a lot of time making videos that don't make any views, and we've never like used the things that worked on our channel to like make it a bit easier for us. And the thing is, the end of the discussion was a bit, okay, now I think we need to play a bit more of the game of Instagram.
Yeah,
Still try to do the things we feel is genuine and authentic and give value, but it's
it's
like if
harder.
everyone is playing the same game and you're trying to go your own way, there's only so much you can get. And but that's, I mean, I would totally hear arguments in the other way, because that's the philosophy that we had. But
Yeah,
what would be terrible in our case is if we don't follow a bit the trend, and then the project stopped before we could even make
yeah,
things that would be even more valuable. And so yeah, I guess it's a pretty like dense subject, and I don't really know where it will go, to be
yeah.
honest.
I also think like on the social media thing, it's it is also like I've kind of like maybe you guys are the same. I don't necessarily look at social media now with the same eyes that I used to. I used to kind of look at it and think, oh, I wish I was doing that, or oh wow, how cool's that? Now I kind of look at it, use it as a bit of like inspiration, like, oh wow, that was super creative. Like, how could I apply something similar to that to tell my story? And I think
Mm.
that's where it's like super powerful because it's like a creative pool of, like
Yeah.
everybody's ideas that you can like, and you don't necessarily have to follow a trend, but it's like, you can kind of see what other people are doing and apply it to your own niche. And I think I've started sort of like using it for that as opposed to using it to just scroll and see what people are doing. It's become like a bit of a creative database, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a huge portfolio that you can, and I guess once you start to create things, you see it completely differently. Or
Yeah.
the things you used to like, now you see them more analytically, so it loses the fun.
Yeah.
Uh,
To me, the
I
learning
think,
was a bit different. I think it was a lesson of humility because before doing this emulation project with Robin, I just started to make some reels about triathlon and giving people tips on how they could start doing triathlon. And I was like, this is so hard to do. I thought it was easy to speak in a camera and then tell people and then do the edit. And I was like, this is a real job. So I think I've got like more respect for the people that do it, and I acknowledge I feel
Yeah.
it's a real job. It doesn't feel like it, but actually to like the way it feels like play when they do it is really remarkable. So that's the
Yeah.
learning I got from watching it also.
I got to agree. Like you look at some people and it looks so effortless and then like
Mm.
you try and film an intro for a video or something and you're on your
mm,
15th take and you're like, fuck, like why can't I just do this? And there is like such a skill to doing it.
Yeah. Is there like one piece of content that you really like, one that you made? It could be like a whole video documentary slash kind of adventure that you did. Is there like one piece
Um,
that you really loved or still love?
mm, for me, like my favorite one's the first one we ever made, and it was called Exploring the Limit. And it was kind of the first thing we ever documented. And I re- I love the way it was shot. It was shot by a mate of mine who was quite young at the time. I think he was 18 or 19. And like he'd done a few like pretty successful little YouTube videos. Like he wants to be like a Hollywood filmmaker. And he'd made
Oh
some
wow.
like Deadpool style videos that had hit millions of views. And his way of kind of doing it was so like professional and it felt like I was kind of like on a set, like the way he was doing the lighting and everything. And for me, it was like when I look back at it, like obviously it was a long time ago now, but I still look at it and I'm like, fuck, it's so like cinematic the way he's done it. Like he's like and like the storyline is so like in depth. Like there's different people telling the story and I'm blown away by it every time I watch it. And like I aspire for like everything to be like that.
And what was it about?
It was my first kind of ultra, I guess, like challenge that I designed for myself. And it was there's the famous hill climb in Taiwan called the Taiwan KOM. And it's
Oh,
typically
yes,
like
right.
September or October, and it's a climb that goes from sea level up to 3,400 meters, and it's like 80 kilometers uphill. And it was the first time I was like, all right, I'm gonna come up with a challenge where I can try and get some media to talk about what I'm doing. And I knew that this event was on, so I said, hey, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do the climb 3 times before the race, and then I'm gonna do the fourth climb as part of the race. And people are gonna talk about it because like I've already done it 3 times. And so it was this whole like concept of how do I get people like talking about ultra cycling on mainstream cycling media? And that was kind of like the first one.
I thought the ultra cycling part of that challenge was to just do the climb, not do it 4 times.
Yeah,
I
it
would have
was,
been satisfied with just 1 time, you know? Like you don't have to do
yeah.
it 4 times. Yeah.
It's fucking hard climb, I tell you.
Yeah, I've seen like a video from GCN actually about it, like not so long ago.
Yeah,
Is that one of your
amazing.
favorite trips or
Yeah,
like races?
for sure. Because like there was no pressure on me at the time, you know, like we were just cowboys and we were just like playing with an opportunity. Like there was no kind of like sponsorship deliverables I had to meet. It was just like my dad came, I had a mate who's a professional photographer came, and I had a mate who's a filmmaker came, and we just went and like had fun. And it was sick. And yeah, like I kind of miss the carefree ability just to go and do that. Now I kind of feel a little bit more like I've got to perform and I've got to hit this deadline and that deadline and get this done and put this on social media. There's more to it. Um, and I think looking back at that, it was more like, yeah, that
Yeah.
sense of freedom.
Yeah, and you're trying to catch that same feeling every time, but now it looks all
Yeah.
more professional. And on the last, I think it's a good moment to like deep dive into the adventures that you had, and there are a lot. I think it's the best is that you tell us the ones that you've loved the most, like because you've done 1 million meters elevation in a year in 2022, the Tour de France in like 10 days in 2021, and the most kilometers ridden in a week in 2020. I've done that in the inverse chronological order, which is really good. So what are the two that's like two or three that
For me, the like all time was the 1,000,000 meters in a year. So that was like going to climb 1,000,000 meters in a year. I'm going to do 52 Everests on 52 different climbs as part of that 1,000,000 meters. And I'm going to try and raise €1 million for mental health charities. Fuck, it was a big year. Like, I reckon I aged myself pretty bad that year because, like, I spent a whole year reaming myself, not getting sick, living like a bit of a monk. Um, it was so hardcore because it was like an entire year. And I think about that now and I feel tired, like even just thinking about it. So I don't know how I actually did it. For me, that's like all-time number one would be really hard to top it. Um,
And how for that specific experience, did you like were there a series of videos and you also like you were trying to raise money through that year?
yeah, so I was trying to raise money through the year. I wasn't doing kind of the YouTube, like I'd had a few videos that I'd put on YouTube, but I
Mm.
wasn't doing regular stuff. Um, we did release a video at the end of that year, kind of summarizing the year. But it was more like a challenge that existed on Strava and on, I guess, Instagram weekly, like posting the photos and stuff of where I was doing the Everest. And yeah, I don't even know where to start with that year. Like,
Mm.
to put it into perspective, it's like 20,000 meters of elevation every week. And that's without having a kind of a week off. So you can't get sick. Um, yeah, every week I was having a day of rest. So then that's 20,000 meters in 6 days. So it's ends up being, over 3,000 meters every single day. Well, you get, yeah, your one rest day, but just over 3,000 meters every other day. But I was also doing an Everest, and it's like the problem with that challenge was that it was so hard to put into perspective at the time.
Yeah.
That was the difficult part of it. Like there was just so much to it. Um, yeah,
And you had sponsors for this whole year, like you pitched this idea, and then you had like what you said, the pressure to perform. Like
yeah,
so there's nothing to do then other than climbing.
yeah. I'm so like I'm super lucky now, like with the partners that I have. I've been with most of them for like a number of years, and they don't necessarily put pressure on me. Like they kind of, we've got a relationship where they know I'm going to produce something and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and it's all really genuine. And so I'm super fortunate that there's nobody kind of saying, "Oh, if you don't do this, then we're going to cancel your contract," and da 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 da. Like it's a super nice relationship, and like it works both ways. Um, but like at the same time, you feel like a sense of pressure within yourself that, oh, what if I don't achieve it? How am I going to feel? And how's that going to then affect negotiations for next year? And it's more like I guess probably more like an internal mental battle than like if I didn't achieve it, sponsors would probably be like, wow, you tried and it was super
Yeah.
cool what you did and like amazing stuff. I just put like all this pressure on myself that like I cannot fail. And I think that's what made it a fucking hard year.
And at the same time, you were raising money for something that like you care deeply about, like that you were like you've experienced. So
Yeah.
you were like really saying to people, I'm enduring, guys. So put in $1 for
Yeah.
nonprofits. It's interesting because I don't know a lot of ultra cyclists, ultra athletes. I know Rich Roll, like
Yeah.
for his podcast, and he has also like a background of addiction. Like I think he only for him it was alcohol. So I guess maybe it's also something that's linked with like this idea of really pushing yourself a lot
Yeah.
after you've had that kind of those kind of experiences.
I think so. Like, and I think it's kind of like a funny one. It's like it helps to put things that like ultra, like anything's like it's hard, whether it's ultra running or ultra swimming or ultra riding, it's kind of hard, like you have these dark times. And I think where somebody's had an addiction problem or a problem with their mental health in perspective, like if we put a 50-kilometer run or a 1,000-kilometer ride in perspective against a drug addiction or a battle with depression, it's kind of nothing.
Yeah,
And I think like somebody that's been through one of those difficult periods, the reason they're often quite good at ultra is because it is hard, but they've often endured something that's much harder. And so it's almost like they're like pretty well equipped to then go and battle against themselves or their mind or the elements. And I think that's like quite a cool thing. Like it's putting what was really difficult time and then sort of like putting it into practice to, hey, I can actually do this because I've been through that.
you kind of have that like cheat code or superpower after going through that.
Yeah.
Would you say it was harder to like go into rehab and I mean just like recover from this addiction or doing the 1 million meters elevation?
Oh, without a doubt, the rehab. Like
Yeah.
I would do 1 million meters of elevation 20 years in a row. Like because like the addiction thing's more it's me, but it's also like family, it's the friends. It's so much more than just like a personal and like the million meters, like I go to bed at night and my mind's fine and I can just sleep. Whereas like the other stuff's like this ongoing um turmoil.
Do you have and any other projects with maybe a little less suffering this time around, like with
Mm,
more
Yeah.
pleasure? Because
mm.
I think if you have to do that much like elevation meters, you were basically doing the same climb every day. So there
Yeah.
was not that much of like a scenery or.
Nah. This year I've got a lot more enjoyable
Do you want
challenges
to talk
planned.
about it, or you want to keep it private
Yeah, we
for the
we can
moment?
chat about it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I
Go ahead.
the first one is like not really well, it's not like a race against the clock. It's not trying to break a fastest time. It's literally, and I'm calling it like the Summit Series. It's climbing the 10 highest peaks in Europe and like riding between them and then riding onto the next one. And it's more of like an adventure. I'll have a rough plan of where I want to get to, but if I'm feeling good, I might do more. If I'm not feeling good, I might do less. And it's more like connecting with just like, you know, the original reason of why I do it all. Like because I like riding my bike and I like seeing the places and I like connecting with people. And I think now with more of a interest and a focus on like the video side of things, that one really excites me as an opportunity to like just capture some really cool stuff and tell some cool stories. And it kind of leads into the second one of the year, which is riding the 1903 Tour de France route. Um, so 5 6 days as they did back in the day. Like it's crazy to think the 1903 tour, like they were doing 400 500 kilometer days back then. Like that was ultra cycling day one, you know? And I think there's something cool about the fact that they did it on bikes with 2 gears and you know, so I'm going to sort of have a bit of a play with that and have some fun with gearing as well to try and replicate how they did it back in 1903. So that's in July. And then in September is my big kind of athletic goal, which is climbing the 3 highest roads up in northern India. So they're crazy elevation, like 5,800 meters high. And there's 3 of them within 500 kilometers of each other. So I'm going to go and try and bit of an FKT attempt between the 3 of them and see how quickly we can do it. So that's September, and then a bit of time to just chill.
That's a that's a huge calendar. So FKT means fastest known time, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And the 10 highest summits in Europe, will you be starting from home? Because we haven't mentioned that, but you're no longer living in Australia. You're in Spain right now.
Yeah, so I'll be starting in Austria actually.
Okay.
So the first one's in Austria, and then I kind of make my way across into Italy, Switzerland, France, and then down to the south of Spain. And I think like as I get closer, I want to publicize more, but like I'm super keen on that one to like try and get people to come out and ride the climbs with me. Um, I just think it'd be a sick way to connect with people. And yeah, I mean, crossing Europe, how cool would it be just to meet different people in different towns along the way?
When you will you be in France? Do you think?
It'll be in May from in France, it'll be around May 13 or 14, I think.
Okay. I mean, we will write that down.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
And
even know where the highest summits of Europe are.
I'll tell
Like
you a
Alps.
couple.
Do you need to go to the how you say the Pyrenees? The
yeah,
Pyrenees?
there's like there's one in the Pyrenees, I think. It's
So
like
the ones in France are Col d'Iseran,
hmm
Galibier, Col Agnel, and then Col de la Bonnet.
okay.
Mm.
So I don't know
There's
if they're close
Yeah, these
to
are the ones you really like watching
William.
on TV when they come, because the day is always epic when they are in it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I've- I'm pretty pumped by this one, to be honest. It's like kind of the less athletic one of the year, but like the one I'm kind of most excited about.
But maybe when you said it, I thought about the discussion we had about like everything getting more extreme. maybe that's what it will come back to is like, okay, you do an experience that's still like a very big challenge, like for the common people, but it's gonna be more, I guess, a genuine and fun experience for you. And I feel like if I would watch a video on YouTube, I would be very happy to watch that, even though it's not like you're not doing 1 million meters.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also a way to differentiate is like we see people when they are really doing this because that's what they love to do when they are having fun with their friends and they are connecting with people. That I think that's the core and the root of like making content on
Yeah,
the internet. So I guess you're right
for sure.
to
I think as well, like on the ultra thing, like there comes a point where you kind of, and I'm not saying it's there yet, but like you kind of can't go much more extreme, like, and I don't want to go out and do something where I'm going to die. Like I'm not here to sort of put myself in that position. Like I actually enjoy living and doing the things. And so like what happens when that limit gets reached? Like sure there's people that keep trying to push it and push it and push it. But I've also like I've kind of realized like why? Like I like the personal challenge of coming up with an idea and going and doing it. Like and I still get a buzz out of doing the extreme stuff, don't get me wrong. But then like yeah, like what is next? And like you
yeah.
say, like maybe it's actually just simplifying it and connecting with people doing something that they can also do and it not having to be, knocking years off your life because it's so extreme and because at the end of the day, it's like, why?
Yeah. I mean, you've had a couple of like you broke 7 Guinness World Records, right?
I've broken two Guinness records, and then we've got, I think over the years we've broken seven or eight
Okay.
records, FKTs.
Okay. So you got 2 Guinness, like you're in the book.
Yeah,
Is
I've
the
got it.
book?
Oh, you can't see it. I've got them on the wall.
The books
Yeah,
are every year there's a new book because I remember when I was like 12, it was crazy. Like you would get the book. It was a big book, usually with like bright, weird colors on it.
like a
And
holograms.
yeah. So there's a 2024 book and we
Yeah, yeah,
can look
yeah.
for Jack Thompson in it.
Apparently, Santa still brings them to most kids under about age 13. Like, there's still one in the
Yeah.
stocking.
And when you like, is there a specific logistic when you're trying to beat that certain like a Guinness record?
Yeah, it's actually really hard to do it, and that's kind of the reason we haven't registered more with them because there's like super strict rules of how many people have got to be there as a witness, and there's logbooks got to be kept, and this photo, the list goes on and on and on, and it gets to the point where you're so focused on just getting the right evidence that you kind of lose sight of why you're there,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make sense. And you also have to pay to register it, and it's a business. Like they're making money.
And do you make money from it? Like once you broke it?
No,
No? Okay.
I get a certificate that I've got to pay for.
Okay,
That's
that's a
crazy.
it's a scam now. We need
Yeah,
to tell Santa to stop
yeah.
bringing those books.
Stop funding them.
Yeah, but
Amazing.
it's funny we talk about like experiencing the journey because I've watched a few videos of people like doing kind of cycling trips, and the one I enjoyed the most watching were the ones where the guy was stopping to have lunch at every random spot he could find, and it was not the one where he was rushing to the finish line. So it's nice like if you will and if you want that to find ways to enjoy more because like
Yeah,
if you enjoy more the journey, then I think people will also like see it,
for
and in a way
sure.
it will show in the content that you do. But
And like on that topic as well, and it's like leads in quite nicely. For me, road cycling and gravel cycling now, it's too fucking serious. Like, I'll be honest, like the other day I was riding out here on a local climb, and I won't mention the clothing brand that it was, but like a bunch of riders came past wearing a particular clothing brand, or I should say, they were going up the climb and I was doing an interval. And it was a short interval, so I managed to go past them, and then I dropped back and they came past me. The way that they just kind of like interacted with me, the way that they kind of like shouted at me as I went past, like as if to say, "Oh, like, yeah, you're a hero for going past." It was so fucking cringe. And like the problem with it all is like I feel like all the content is so everyone trying to be like this perfect fucking specimen that's achieving these like like there's nothing real anymore. It's like I don't know. Everybody's become like a Star Wars drone. Like everyone looks the same and does the same, and
Yeah.
like I'm fully over it. Like cycling
Okay,
is broken.
I have a spicy question for you then. Like, do you have
Go.
a clothing sponsor or not?
I'm with Specialized for clothing.
Oh, they do clothing as well. I thought they only
Yeah,
do helmets. All right, all
yeah,
right.
So no
Right,
spicy
then
question?
there is no spicy question because it would be like yeah because like I mean there are like a few brands that really care about the image like Panama Studio Map these kind of things they really like emphasize that and
yeah.
so like if they were to offer you like a nice ticket would you consider it or you don't really want to play a role in that game in a way.
I'd say like 2 years ago, I would have jumped at the opportunity,
Yeah.
but I've now kind of realized that I don't want to be a part of that. I,
Hmm.
don't- I wouldn't like, I don't want to be one of the cool kids that looks down on someone else because they're not wearing the same
Yeah.
fucking 60 euro socks, like,
I think I've come like kind of to the same realization because when I started cycling, it was in like 2021, and I got my bike and I was riding always by myself. And the first piece of clothing that I bought was from Decathlon, and then I
yeah,
wanted to kind of like look cooler on the bike, and I was always cycling by myself. Like I didn't have any clubs or something, so I want to feel to be like part of a club. So I bought like the Panama Studio Bibs that cost me like 270 euros. I remember. I got the 10% discount on the newsletter, so I paid like 240 euros. But I mean, it was like 10% of the salary I was getting at the time, so it was insane. And now I'm like I just want to get cheap stuff that works.
yeah,
And like I really don't care about what they look like. But I mean, if I look cool on the bike, yes, but I don't care what brand it is. So
yeah, uh,
I feel it's like a cycle, and
for
Like,
sure.
do you feel it's more like the responsibility of the brand or on the people and then the like the influencer that I think I guess like you said about the drone for me like influencers like and running cycling influencers it's like they are it's a copy and paste and copy and paste like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
goes so fast and it's and they are like it seems like it's working like
yeah,
there's a like the cake is getting bigger and bigger and bigger but in a way they are all doing the same thing so you cannot be genuine if you're doing the same thing as 20 other people but I don't want to put
yeah,
like I don't want to criticize those people because it's never easy to put yourself out there and do the things that you have to do. I just would feel a bit weird in their shoes because I wouldn't know am I
yeah,
a product of myself or am I a product of the brands I really want a partnership with?
yeah,
And on the brand side, I don't know like they are happy like there are people wearing their brand. It's getting the hyped and everybody doing like I bought a bike 1 year ago and I had only two brands in my head when I started to
yeah.
look on the internet. But yeah, it's a bit
It's
weird.
it's kind of like I look back and for me it was like Rafa was kind of like the original mm, let's say like cool kid, like
Hmm.
before like Rafa it was kind of like there were these smaller brands that were still big brands but more like your Santini and your Nalini, and there were these small brands that were making more like your team kit. And Rafa was kind of for me like the first one that was kind of just doing plain kit so you didn't necessarily feel like you had to belong to a team. And like I feel like it's kind of come full circle that like now you've got these brands. And like I don't want to name names, but like there's brands where it's like trying to I say emulate, trying to emulate that sort of like Rafa vibe of being like exclusive and a bit different. But then the messaging that comes with it is like, yeah, come and join like the club and be a part of this whole thing that's but then it's kind of not different because like everyone's doing the same thing and it's kind of like contradicts itself. It's like if you want to be something small and boutique and niche, keep it small, boutique and niche. Don't try and take on the world and get everyone in it looking the same because then it's not small, boutique and niche. And
But when,
in my mind, I'm
yeah,
confused.
when the strategy to grow is to be small, unique, and niche, then it gets like it's Inception. Like we don't know what's happening.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
everybody's like just a small friendly club, but you're selling things like to millions of people all over
Yeah.
the world. And even like with William, if tomorrow there's Rafa or Panama Stu that come and say, "Oh, you have a really nice podcast interviewing cyclists," would be okay. Let's do this. You know? So we are all pretty like we all contradict each other,
Yeah.
but I guess you know it if you're doing things genuinely
Yeah.
and when you are playing a game. I'm sure that you feel it in the end. So
And I'm not saying not everybody that
mm,
wears these brands is
yeah,
like that, and not everyone that, I don't want to make a blanket statement,
yeah.
but I just feel like in cycling at the moment, so much of it is about like that perception of being like the cool kid, and I'm not really into that.
And that's stressful, like because you know that this whole thing of being the cool kid is what got every one of us pretty anxious at school. I think
Yeah.
like so you started to do a sport that seems pretty adventurous and cool, and you do gravel, which is like the adventure part of cycling. But then you end up at school having to look like the cool kid and feeling bad that you have socks that are
Yeah.
from Decathlon. And we love you, Decathlon. Great socks.
And and now the gravel that was like super kind of like different and
Mm.
inclusive has now become world tour like retirement part one. Like it's
Yeah,
like I don't know.
it's
I've
it's a never-ending circle of the thing that starts unique, small, and boutique becomes too big,
yeah,
and then it's like, okay, let's squeeze as much money as we can before there's
yeah.
something else. Uh, yeah, it's I guess the game is working by itself, and we are trying to navigate.
Trying to
All
work out where
right.
you fit in.
Yeah. Mm.
Well,
Yeah,
I think you are a few moves ahead. Like I don't think riding in India it's still like the very
Yeah.
popular destination for cyclists. You're very
not
far
this
away
year,
from
but maybe next year it's on trend.
yeah.
2 years.
Yeah, it's not quite Girona or Mallorca or whatever, but yeah.
That's it.
What's the best
Yeah.
place you've what you like you've ridden your bike in?
Um, Super far out country is like, well, probably I've got two, like Bhutan, which is like
Hmm.
in that India part of the world, in between India and China. It was just a fucking wild place to ride. Um, like there's no traffic lights in the country. It's just like proper like adventure. And then like honestly, I've done some like really cool riding in like Asia. So like Taiwan would honestly be up there like one of the best places I've ridden. It's like the landscapes, like you've got everything in such a small space, and I could go and ride there for months. It's just tropical, and
Yeah.
I look outside and it's a little bit overcast, and I'd like to be in Taiwan right now.
Well, we have never talked about it with Robin yet because we took the plane tickets like literally 5 days ago, but we will be moving to Korea for 3 months in September.
Oh, nice.
So, and I don't know if you know, but like the how you could say the map of cycling paths in Korea is insane,
Yeah.
and you've got like 500 kilometers of uninterrupted cycling pathways
I
that go from
saw
the
that,
north
yeah.
of the country to the south. So if you're ever interested, we can host you in Seoul, and then
Yeah.
you make your move to Busan to the south, because that
Honestly,
would be
like
really cool. Yeah.
my dad and I wanted to go and do that pathway. Like we'd looked at it because it looks
Yeah.
amazing. I'd still love to come and do it.
Yeah, I talked with people that did it running, but cycling is probably more enjoyable, especially if you come with your dad. So,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
flat too, so
Okay.
it's not too hard. Yeah.
Why Korea? Why are you guys going there?
So we both went to the same school with Robin. We had a 5-year business school, and during that time we were able to go do an exchange period abroad, and we both went to South Korea and really loved it. We went at
Right.
different times, and we only met after we had been to Korea, but we just want to go back there. I've had like a Korean girlfriend for a long time, and so I have like many reasons as to why I feel really attached to the country and I feel really comfortable there, and just like South Korea is really like a vibe, that country. The food's
Yeah.
great, people is nice, the country's safe, and we won't go there for cycling because I think I don't have the money to pay for like the for bringing my bike there, but just living there is going to be really nice, I feel like. Have
Oh,
you been there?
never. I'd
Yeah.
love to go to Korea.
Yeah, I feel it's probably quite similar to Taiwan, so that's why I wanted to introduce the subject of that country, because I think it's likely that if you like Taiwan, you're going to love South Korea as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll whack it on. I'll come with you guys. See you in
All
September.
right.
Amazing.
Let's do this. Yeah, well, I think it's been quite a long time already. Is there like any things you'd like to cover? Like one thing that we didn't talk about and you'd feel like sharing?
Um, I think we've covered like a good selection, hey?
Yeah, the usual answer is no. There's nothing
Yeah.
much to cover.
I feel like we've touched on heaps.
Is that like an Australian expression? We've touched on heaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretending to understand. Like I was like, okay, yeah, we've touched some hips. Pretty cool.
What does it mean? So at least everyone goes away with a bit of English vocab.
It means like we've spoken about a bit of everything.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, like we've just like touched a little bit of everything and
I think we could have continued for quite a long time because I feel like we didn't even deep dive in most of the experiences you had. So I'm sorry if you wanted to talk about more about like your trip to Japan, but I guess people can find it on your YouTube channel. So that's the
Yeah.
question we ask usually at the end. So where can people find you if they want to follow you? What's the
On Instagram, it's Jack ultra-cyclist, just one word. And on YouTube, I think it's the same, Jack ultra-cyclist official, I think, because I think I had to, someone had taken it or something. I had to find a new one.
yeah.
Yeah, it's Jack ultra-cyclist in 3 words. I've
Cool.
got it under my eyes. So yeah, I highly recommend the video in Japan. It's quite cool and it's recent also. So
And we're gonna recommend both, like the 3 of us will recommend the first ever video on your channel.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen it, but now I want to see it.
Yeah.
So that's I think people will enjoy that.
And that is a wrap on the 5th episode of the Emulation podcast. We are really grateful to have had this conversation with Jack, and we really hope that you got something valuable out of it. If you made it this far, we'd like to thank you, and if you haven't already, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It really means the world to us, and it actually helps a lot more than you might think. So that's it for today. We wish you a pleasant day, good training, and we see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.